So welcome everyone. I'm Laura. I'm a product designer and design system jolly one-man band at SICPA, and I'm very excited to be here today to host and to moderate this session on creating an integrated design system. There's Jiri, right? Trecak,
Yes.
CEO and founder of Supernova, and then Mike Kamminga from CEO of Tokens Studio. Hello, guys. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Again, we're here to, talking about this integration of Tokens Studio with Supernova. Very exciting. I want to hear all about it. We're going to have a small demo as well. So we're gonna see what's this looks like. Just few information. Can you hear us, right? Yes. Can you see us, I suppose? Yes. Okay. There's a Q&A panel, so you can ask questions in the Q&A. We're going to address questions at the end, so to ease a bit the conversation. So we're gonna talk a little bit through this, what this integration looks like, what does it mean to have an integrated design system, and then we're going to address your questions at the end. So be patient if your question is not addressed at the beginning. So, but we're gonna do it at the end. As much as possible, we're gonna try to answer all the questions. The webinar is going to be recorded. And then last thing is that I need to remember is that you can enable automated captions. Cool. All right, let's jump into it. So, okay, first questions about this is how this collaboration, did this collaboration come up? How did it all started? Seems like a very natural progression to me, and I'm very excited about hearing this and what does it look like. But I want to hear from you. How did it all started?
Mike, would you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think I've been in touch with Jiri for quite a while, of course, I think the first reason how things started coming about is that our products are pretty close. If you think about the natural design process, right? Because more and more teams are using design tokens through Token Studio in Figma, and of course the next big question is that where do I create a source of truth? Where do I create my documentation, right? And I think increasingly in both our user bases we got more and more requests that, hey, this should be easier than it is today. And yeah, that's where Jiri and I started talking, and yeah, we kind of got this idea that this should be a relatively low-hanging fruit to make this better than it is today. What do you say, Jiri?
Yeah, I want to say that low-hanging fruit took almost a year, so it has taken some time. I also do want to say that there should be so much more in design system tooling than there is now. Right, because right now it feels like I know almost everyone from design system tooling, and that sort of feels like there should be more. So I think it was natural that we got to meet. But I think one thing that we really share in common with Mike is that we really believe in the ecosystem in general, and I think there will be a huge push for an ecosystem in general. You will see that from us, and I'm sure you will see that from a lot of tool makers as well, other than us, because I think it's only logical if you think about design systems, and we will talk about integrated design systems and what it means for all of us. I think for everyone it means a little bit something different, right? But for me, it just means that everything really seamlessly flows together, and you don't have to, like, right before we started this recording, we were talking that it is like so hard to actually explain people like what each piece of the tooling does, who is responsible for what, how to connect it, right? You need like a legion of engineers to do that. So it's actually difficult, and I think if you have more people that just share this common goal, then it's only logical that you start creating something together, especially if both of you or the teams that you work with are very interested in this topic.
Yeah, no, indeed. When I was trying to, when I joined SICPA I was trying to, build version 1 of our design system, one of the biggest struggles that I had was to explain, the pipeline. I was talking to developers, right? So people that know their job and what they need to do. But design systems is a bit another world. Like it's about learning new skills in terms of development, for example. And I was talking about tools and also with other designers, and we were talking about Figma, and now back then it was called Figma tokens, right? So, and people are like, why do I need Figma? And then I need Figma tokens. Like, what's the deal? Like, what do they have in common when they overlap and when they don't? And then what's Supernova? What I can do with that? Do they communicate? So I really needed to draw like a pipeline, right? And so I'm so happy to hear about this integrated design system, because it feels like kind of scattered now. You have one tool to do one thing and then the other, but they're not connected. Here we're talking about integrated design system. What can you please expand a little bit on that? What does integrated means?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and we can also jump to a demo and show you a little bit about that. Or actually, if you don't mind, I would just jump straight to the demo, and then we can talk about what it means to be integrated.
Go
right?
for it.
All right. I'm really excited about this, because it has been in my head that we will do something like this for so long, and this is finally, like, since last 2 hours out. So I hope you will enjoy it. Anyway, so we have Tokens Studio here. This is very familiar for most of you that are here with us, I assume. And the vision for this, what we have created, is that it should be really easy, even for designers who maybe don't have engineering resources at the beginning, to start with any sort of integration of any kind, really. No, not just with Supernova and Tokens Studio, but in general, right? It should be very easy, so you can try, so you don't have to convince and get a buy-in from, say, your managers when you are building design system, that you need to pull other resources to even try something. So I think the main pain point that we tried to solve was making it easier. And so today we are really happy to show you a new provider for Tokens Studio, which is actually Supernova. So if you are on version 1.35.5 or later, you will see a Supernova in your provider list. So anytime basically you run a plugin, you will have it now. And as you can see, I already have the provider created. Now the setting up of the provider is super easy. There is a tutorial that you can follow. But in general, you just name your connection, you give Supernova the access to the plugin. And then you also copy paste the design system URL to which you want to get your data. So I have a Supernova here. I would just take the URL, copy paste it into integration. And then I can optionally also configure what the integration needs to do. We have, so to explain, there is a lot that you can do with Tokens Studio, and there is a lot that you can do with Supernova, right? And if you have very simple design system, maybe just like one theme, don't even care about light or dark, your integration will be very easy, because you literally just point to a direction and it will import the data. But there are far more sophisticated design systems that are maybe more mature than with what you would start with. And there you would have multiple brands. Maybe you have different light and dark mode per each brand, right? And so the complexity grows very quickly. And for that, I think Token Studio is amazing. You just create sets, you combine the sets together. You basically have a like multi-branded design system and all of different combinations, right? So this is really great for managing it. And we wanted to bring the power of Supernova to it, so you can also document it in a very seamless way. And so with the settings, there is plethora of configuration that you can do. We will not go into details too much. There is a tutorial how to do that, but just know that if you are working in simple setup, it is easy to do. If if you are working in multi-branded, very complex setups, it is still very easy to do, and even designer is capable of doing it just through that configuration of the provider. Once you do have it configured, however, this is where I think the main fun starts. So you will see a very familiar interface. As you can see, I have pull from Supernova and push to Supernova in here. And anytime I make any change in my tokens, I can actually synchronize this data with Supernova. So let's try that. Maybe I would like to change this black color. And one thing that I need to point out is that I've actually created 3 different sets of tokens. One is my core palette. So in here I have some red, blue shades, also some base colors that I'm reusing in my brands. And then I've created 2 brands appropriately named. One is Supernova, one is Token Studio. And in those brands, I have specific tokens that correspond only to that brand, right? So maybe I have some foreground colors, maybe I have some background colors, and the rest is taken from the palette. And the integration actually allows you to define this. So you can say, import me, say, core and Supernova colors and typography into one specific brand in Supernova, and then take the same core palette and also see Figma is not doing well today. We'll run the plugin again. Sometimes it happens with Figma.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It happens to me as well. You just rerun it. Yeah.
That's fine. Nonetheless, the plugin just picks up where we left. So we can take the core set and the Token Studio set as well, and again point it into different brand, as you will see. I've already configured all of this, and the only thing I want to do is maybe change this black color to be just a tiny bit different, which will allow me to now see that I have something to push to Supernova. So I will click on push to Supernova, which gives me a confirmation where I'm actually pushing this, the URL of my design system. And when I click push, what happens is that we are now basically making a connection between Token Studio and Supernova and importing the tokens in a format where Supernova will accept it, and also storing the data for later use, because you can also pull from Supernova and any member of your team can then use those tokens that you have. You can also open the Supernova workspace from here. So we'll do that. And now, as you will see, we actually do have all the tokens imported. Now I have mentioned that, and we will use the tokens in a moment, just so we don't have just a list. But I have mentioned that I have multiple brands. So I've also created in advance to this demo 2 brands in Supernova, one called Supernova and one called Token Studio. And if we, for example, go to a foreground colors, which I know are different, then you can see that I have 3 tokens, which are of some values. And if I switch to a Token Studio and again search for a foreground, you'll see that the shades are actually lighter. So this was black, now it's white, and vice versa. So basically, if we would configure this within 2 minutes, you can have your data in Supernova. And also any change that you do will propagate to Supernova just by clicking on that push button from the integration. Now, we are talking about integrated design systems, so it would be really cool if we actually could use that data and then keep them in sync with Token Studio, right? So the first thing that you will notice is that actually there is a new icon in Supernova, and it says that the source is coming from Token Studio. Now, what this means is that this token actually has origin somewhere else. And if you change it in that origin, it will change everywhere where you see this icon on this particular element. So, for example, let's say that we would like to document our design choices and the tokens. I've created a design system documentation for my design system called Super Tokens, because clearly, I think you see what I did there. Just a very subtle joke. If we switch to the colors, I'll document my design system decisions, my colors, just by basically providing the Token Studio token. So I want to document the FG, the foreground colors, simply writing token group into the documentation will allow me to pull from the foreground, which was created from Token Studio, Now you can see, again, it says source is Token Studio. So anytime I change this, it will change in this documentation. And also I can pick from the brand that I have created in the Token Studio. Right? So in here, I've actually really liked this presentation of the colors and typographies and tokens, where you use tabs for different brands. You might choose a different representation of the tokens, but this is what I like. So for the Token Studio, I will also do the same. I'll add a token list and foreground, but I will switch to a different brand for Token Studio. So as you can see in the Supernova tab, I have one data source, and it was from brand called Supernova. In a Token Studio brand Token Studio, you will have different values. And now if we publish all of this together, it does this really nice effect, which I actually visually really like. So the documentation was published. We can go to the style guide. And now inside the colors, I will have a Supernova brand. But if I switch to Token Studio, I will also have Token Studio brand, right? And the nice thing about this is that we do keep this by sort of black magic connection to Token Studio. So let's say that the foreground muted for a brand Token Studio changes, right? So we will go to Figma. I'll go to Token Studio, find the muted color, edit the token to something not muted, so we actually know what is happening, and I will push to Supernova. Again, confirmation, I do want to push. We are basically doing the delta, applying the changes that were done in the meantime, while you have been pushing changes or not pushing the changes to Supernova. I mean, you can open the workspace again. And now if we go to a Token Studio, if I search for FG, you will see that the token has changed again, because this is from the Token Studio source. We can go to the documentation. It was changed inside the documentation as well. But it actually wasn't changed in the publish documentation, because we still need to click the publish button just to have a control, I would say, over what we are publishing. And there is plenty of other things that you can do. But one other thing that I wanted to show, just so I'm not boring you with all the tiny details, is that in advance to this video or to this seminar, I actually also enabled code integration for this. And so I've created automatic CSS export, which is connected to a Token Studio. So anytime you push something from Token Studio to Supernova, we will actually automatically trigger a build, if you will. As you can see, the latest build was at 1918 for me. And we can view APR. I've set it up so it exports the CSS. I had some changes already staggered there, so there is more tokens changed, but as you can see, the foreground, for example, was muted. So not only it touches the data that you are using inside the documentation, but also you can use it in code integration. Now, I also said that you can use it in the opposite direction. So anytime your new team member joins, they can basically just use the license key, or the Supernova access token to log in with their Supernova repository. They put the design system URL there, and from there on, they can just click on pull from Supernova, and their data will be synchronized from the latest, basically the latest push that you have done, right? So Supernova is both a storage of the data, but also something that can push the data. However, we have made it so that you can edit the tokens only in Token Studio. We wanted to basically make them, or Token Studio, primary provider of the tokens, because this is also where the experience for editing the tokens is mostly the best. However, for people who are also engineers on the call, there is also CLI version of this. So when you are using a GitHub, Azure, or Bitbucket, or anything like that, you can use the CLI and synchronize it even from your JSON. So both of the workflows should work, but this makes it much easier for designers to start and basically use the tokens within Supernova and with Token Studio. There is quite a bit more, but I know that we still have QA session. So we wrote quite extensive documentation. If you go to the Learn documentation of Supernova, there is quite a lot that goes into that integration, and the rabbit hole goes deep. So, and also if you are interested, feel free to just fire some question on me, and I will do my best to answer.
Wow, that was a lot to take on. Mike, do you want to add something to this?
Oh no, I think Jiri covered it quite well. So, but I see a lot of questions popping up.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. I have a question. Sorry, maybe it's a newbie question, but yes, it does make a lot of sense, and it does make the life of a designer easier. I am a former developer, but I was not coding proactively, let's say, in the last years. So as a one-man band here at SICPA, I needed to, bring up again my skills in. It was fine, it was cool, but still, I'm happy to hear that still this looks like a lot easier for designers, for example. What happens with, for example, now I have my GitHub account, I have my GitHub repository with the design tokens, and then I'm using the CLI there in my Visual Studio to connect to Supernova Docs. What happens to hold that?
I think it is actually very flexible in this setup. That's mostly why I also mentioned that we have the code version of this, basically, right? So the design interface and the connection within the plugin basically builds on top of that. And I know of setups of some of the largest companies that we have where they can use both, basically the design integration and also the code integration, because Token Studio allows you to have multiple providers at the same time, right? And then it is really up to you how you work with that. You can, of course, set it up so your GitHub is the source of truth. So then you are pushing to GitHub, and maybe on GitHub, you will use the CLI library or the CLI integration, and that will be basically synchronized every time you push tokens to GitHub, or you make a change manually in GitHub, right? So then Supernova is basically on the same level as Token Studio, where Token Studio is pulling the data and Supernova is pulling the data. Maybe Token Studio is also pushing the data. Supernova is just basically there to sort of listen and siphon off the data. But then you can have set up where maybe Token Studio is pushing to both at the same time. Or there is even this super convoluted setup, if you will, where you can actually use Supernova to generate the representation that Token Studio does for you using our exporters and the synchronization with the code platforms that you did. That I would not recommend, because you are literally using something that is not really meant to be, because it doesn't logically make sense. But you are not limited to one particular workflow. So this is more like enhancement of what we have been doing. And I think, like, I will not speak for Mike, but I think this is something that we both sort of want, that like it logically just grows over time. And when you start playing with the integration, I think you will encounter things that are there still to be desired, right? I think this is only like the very beginning of what we have done. We are showing the people, hey, we mean this, right? And it is worth investing into this tool stack. But over time, as our offering grows, as Token Studio offering grows, we would like to keep the integration as close as possible. So I think what you are seeing today, and when we talk maybe in a year time, will probably be completely different, but I'm almost sure that it will be much more seamless, right? So I think going in a seamless direction, designer can start is on equal level as a developer, have the same powers basically, and equally, if developer wants to go really deep and have sophisticated setups, we can provide that. I think historically we've started with this. This was a real challenge in design systems. I hope that even other tool makers follow this, and we start to make it easier on teams, because design systems are hard as they are, and tools don't have to, complicate it further. Just my 50 cents, I would say.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and if I may add to this, because I think this also starts coming close to the, you mentioned ecosystem, right? And what does ecosystem mean? Because ecosystem can be great, but I think what it really boils down to is eventually also agnosticism in the data, right? That we use to store design data. And I think everybody's been waiting patiently for the DTCG design tokens proposal for a spec. And we've been at that part for a couple of years now. I think we're getting somewhere, right? But you'll also see that today there are gaps that are not filled up yet by the spec, and that's how every spec starts. It's fine, right? It starts simple and it grows over time. But I think then to build ecosystem, it was also important for us to kind of align on what we think is the future, right? And what do we need to cover, basically, that's outside of the spec. How do we deal with that? And how do we create a predictable future so that these integrations can reliably work, right? And that we can also facilitate companies who are using our tooling or some of our tooling, right? To build their own ecosystem around their design system and have this data flow freely between the different points. So I think that's great, and yeah, like Jiri said, early days, at least at Token Studio, we always believe release early, release often, and I think that's what we'll do, and keep working on. And I saw some interesting feature requests already in the Q&A, so we'll probably get to those. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we're gonna do those soon.
Yeah, it's always nice to do those, because you get so many new ideas that you can then use, right? In some cases we thought about them, but like there is nothing better than collective power of like hive mind, basically, of 140 people asking for things.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I'm looking through the Q&A myself, and there are a lot of interesting questions. Before we jump to the Q&A, maybe we still have a bit of time to cover some additional questions, and I would really love to do that. So we mentioned multi-brand tokens, right? It's something, for example, that here it's going to come in SICPA. We have 2 to 3 brands, and we might have going to be a 4th one still to be discussed. But I would love to hear your some examples, if you know some examples of successful setup of multi-brand tokens in both Token Studio and then Supernova. Can you recall some good example of that?
I definitely can, but the thing is, I cannot really talk about them because most of them are in public, right? I would, however, like to ask Mike about this, because I think Token Studio has sort of started this idea of like headless design systems and making it easy. So like you literally have probably the best person on the planet to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Actually, yeah, I have to think now a bit if I have to call out design systems. But I can surely say there's one design system. They started quite early on with Multibrand. These are the guys at Sainsbury, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And they've been using the Token Studio for quite some time now. They've done a pretty good job, I think, on doing I think a 5 or a 6 brand design system. So one of the very early people. Yeah, there's a couple of other ones, but even I honestly don't know if I can bring that up here. But yeah, if we come from the headless design system philosophy, right? I think this is really I think that sort of radically changed the mindset, because I can still remember when Esther and I started working on this headless design system a couple of years ago. And I mean, there was times where we didn't even believe that we were going to get there with tooling, right? Because we were all there in Figma. I just remember that, right? We didn't have auto layout even by then. That was yet to come. And then we saw this rapid acceleration, and that's where also the collaboration with Jan started, and we started really thinking about, okay, can we actually do this, right? And And if you see where we've come from there, and not even like, let's say just over a year ago, I think that we had the Figma talk about the headless design system. And if you see the shift that has happened since then, it's just amazing to see, like, you know, with how much confidence so many teams have actually introduced themes, modes, and started thinking about way more complex stuff than before, right? So it's not just light and dark mode anymore, but how do we deal with like different densities? How do we deal with like, you know, fluid typography skills, you know, and how do we deal with, you know, other accessibility modes, right? For people with color blindness and different variations of that. So, you know, it's just amazing to see like how many problems people start solving when there's a little piece of tooling that's enabling and empowering people. And now when this becomes easier and easier, and when documentation and pipelines become seamless, I think this is going to empower people even to a further level without having very complicated knowledge of pipelines. And I think you mentioned it earlier, like Laura, that even though you have some dev experience, right, you have to get into it. You have to understand tools like Theo or Style Dictionary or a custom built pipeline. And it's not something that people generally do in their day-to-day jobs. It's a new stuff, like you said. And it's often a bottleneck where basically initiatives sort of die, right? And I think that way the future is looking much brighter now, because you're basically set up in a couple of minutes and you're good to go. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, indeed. No, thanks for adding that. A cool reminder for me to go back to watch that recording about headless design systems. It was so cool, and I was amazed, right? And time has come for me to go back to that. You mentioned something really interesting. Yes, pipelines and tools. One thing that and you mentioned Style Dictionary, Mike. One question on my side, I saw that recently, actually end of March, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you guys at Token Studio have also now released Style Dictionary configuration tool, right? Is it, or is it a playground? Is it something we can start looking into? I think also that could be also another piece of this pipeline, like as a non-developer or not full-time developer. That's also something that could help out, like at least, you know, for those grassroots design systems that need to build something really quick, teams that need to prove the value of a design system to someone else, to say, hey, just get me a developer to work with me. That could be also another very important tool to dig more into.
Yeah, I think definitely in the early days, right? So to just elaborate a little bit on what it is. So we've actually had a package, which is the, so we had a token transformer package before, and then after that we released recently the Style Dictionary Transforms package, which is basically tailored on the Token Studio token format to make it really easy. And along with that, we built actually a playground where you can just upload your tokens and kind of set up your transform with the UI. So yeah, this is great for you know, for I would say the prototype stage, right? And that's where we really build it to empower designers to basically show their developers, like, hey, here, this is how you can get your tokens. On the other hand, that becomes a bit more obsolete, of course, once you have an integrated system, right? And I think that's what it's all about, because the moment you have Supernova connected, your pipelines are covered. So at that point, I still think that you wouldn't necessarily want to go there and you know, try to set up your GitHub actions and stuff, because it can be so much easier, really, to run those pipelines directly on the platform.
I actually wanted to add something to that, because I saw that there is a question about this specifically. Jason is asking, can Supernova replace Style Dictionary to transform tokens to different platforms? And I've seen like probably all the setups that you can have in design systems. There is a lot of companies that we talk with. A lot of them build their own custom systems that are nothing you have seen before and are just one-offs. Some are using Style Dictionary, some are using Supernova exporters. There is really no one size fits all. So it is like so difficult to say it can replace Style Dictionary. Like if I would be building a stack, of course I would use Supernova, right? But I'm a little bit biased. And the reason for it, however, would be that you can, it is literally like one click, you set up basically GitHub login, right? And or Azure Bitbucket, whatever. That becomes really difficult to manage. And usually, and especially on scale, it requires approval process, and getting those engineering resources necessary is difficult. So I would say, actually, for prototyping purposes, this is easier because even designer can do that. And in many cases, designers will be the one maybe just exploring this, right? Maybe clicking around and finding something amazing. But again, I think it's all about the ecosystem. So at the end, I think it should be as easy to use Supernova as it is now, style dictionary. And I think with Supernova, it is much easier to start. And of course, we have some really large clients that do use those exporters in production, especially for multi-brand, where then that saves a lot of time because you just don't have to spin up your own infrastructure, your own certification. It becomes a mess.
Yeah. I'm like looking at the time. I just want to make sure that we have time for the question and answers. One thing about the documentation, what's like, can you share some kind of best practices for documenting design tokens effectively? Like myself, I'm struggling when I have a developer that works with me, and sometimes like, I don't want to look at Figma, not really. So how, or like, and then I document it, of course, in Supernova, super easy. But how? What's your take on this? What do you have any suggestion on how to best document design tokens?
Yes, I have a lot of suggestions. We don't have time to go through them. And again, as with the exporters, it really depends on a setup, right? But I think in general, if I would highlight like one primary mistake that almost all teams I see do, is that they are not focused on jobs to be done. I think you can see that even in, like, for example, Polaris is amazing design system, right? We all know this. Everyone looks on that site from time to time. We give it as example, like every second stream, basically. Even Polaris team like publicly accepts that there is lots to be done, right? And they spend unholy hours on that. But one thing I would personally really like looking on their documentation is to go far beyond explaining like what the tokens do, rather focus on how they should be used, because there is like a laundry list of tokens that you can use, but it is really hard to make sense of them. So I actually really like documentations where you go and you see like, you are designing this, so you use those tokens. You are using building this component, and it has those 3 associated tokens with them, and they can only be of those values. And here is the reason why, right? And I think by chunking this content this way, you are probably giving when doing service to the users that are reading the documentation. Because one thing is to create the documentation, but to create it so that people actually understand what you are trying to say to them and are not overwhelmed with the data, that is actually real art. And oftentimes I wonder how tools like Supernova can help with that, right? How they can help users not to be overwhelmed with massive amounts of data that design systems usually are. So I would say focusing on jobs to be done, that would be like my number one recommendation to everyone, and doing like bite-sized content, not overloading users with 200 tokens, but rather say 3 maybe for a component, and explain why it is.
That sounds like good advice. Thanks for sharing this. Let me just ask a few last questions about what's lying ahead of us. What's the future of design systems, right? We're talking about this very cool integration, and I'm going to try it out right after the webinar. But what's the biggest challenge? Like, do you think that, if we think about the design, like the future of design systems, and what do you think that what's the role of this integration? What's the role of this integration in the future of design systems, where we're going? Should we look forward to more integrations like this one?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, we're coming back to ecosystem, right? So I think there's a couple of things that we can expect. One area where I think as we go through maturity, right, we're going to look at more and more automation, right? So there's still a fair amount of, or I would say an excessive amount of manual labor involved in building a design system today. And it's also a lot of people doing the same thing over and over again, right? Like, you know, how much further can we evolve a button, right? And I know it's a cliche example, but it's true. And so if you think about, you know, how design systems will evolve and how much more dynamic design systems will become, let's also be honest about it, right? Like with the coming of design system, we got great consistency and we optimized things, we got efficiency, right? But stuff also maybe it's gotten a little bit boring, right? Because it has taken out a certain level of expression, I would say, right? And some of it for the good, but also, like, I think now we're already at a point where more and more tooling comes in and where we can think about a bit more exciting stuff. Before, a lot of the design system work was really in the plumbing. And now that the plumbing is getting sorted, like the plumbing is moving off to the infrastructure service providers. Now again, we can start thinking about the more exciting things. We can dream again, right? Because there's ecosystem growing and that's offering things. And specifically with design tokens, you know, design systems are one example. Design tokens have been around in other domains for ages, right? Like if you think about CAD/CAM software architecture, right? It's all parameter-based design. So yeah, and I see some of those things going to come along. Let's say constraint-based design, for example, with AI coming in, right? That is another big challenge that we're having ahead, but it's going to make an impact in terms of, you know, assisted design, right? So I think that's where, you know, yeah, things being able to tie in together, to have this sort of common language to communicate is like super important. Yeah, what do you think, Jiri?
I will probably have a hot take, but I think what we should strive. So you asked what is the biggest problem of design systems, right? And I think there are two. One is fragmentation. Like you have so much data floating in so many different tools, different, not even tools, like many things are on paper, many things are in Excel spreadsheets, right? There is just a huge mess of data. It is really difficult to work with them and they are not interconnected in any way. So I would like if all of this goes away and if it just seamlessly flows. We've already talked about this. But then my hot take is that I would very much like if design systems actually sort of stop the obsession with the tooling, right? Because I think right now, and it sort of reinforces what Mike was saying, right now, when you start design system, you immediately start thinking tooling. Like, do I use this documentation platform? Do I use style dictionary transformer? Do I opt for something else, right? And I think a lot of thinking about design system that then actually revolves around choices of your tooling. And in many cases, it limits your thinking. I've seen that many times. So if it doesn't for you, it does for a lot of people. And I think because it sort of doesn't flow organically, it will be like this until, you know, we just get rid of this. The tools will be basically in the background, just providing you with like great service, but you will be really only focused on the design system itself. And I think with the AI, what Mike was mentioning, we will maybe not even be thinking about design system as we are right now. We will probably think about the experience of the design system. I think that will be like the highest level, and then everything else will be offloaded to tooling. And that's the magic that Mike was talking about, right? So it is weird to say that as a tool maker, that people should not care about the tools, right? But it is actually true. Like the best, the most sophisticated, you know, areas of life that we do are really seamless and highly automated as well. So So I think this is where we are going, but it will take a lot of work and also a lot of mindset change from people. And I think this will come over time as we see what is the true potential of design systems, because I think we are not there just yet.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Indeed, indeed, agree as well. And I think we already got a long way in the last years compared to, you know, what it was at the beginning. I was working into another, like on another design system, and it looked like very different back in the days, right? All right, so I have another final question, but I don't have time. I'm going to jump to Q&A. There's a question from Taylor Cashton. It's a very interesting one. It's a long one, and I think the answer is also very long. It cannot be covered now, but the questions that we're not going to cover now, you're going to get an answer through other channels, through Discord or whatever. Jason Vale asks, can Supernova replace Stack Dictionary to transform tokens to different platforms? We already, I think we already covered that, right? Yeah. Taylor is asking another question. Which is, if there is an error in syntax or taxonomy made when editing a token in Token Studio, when pushing to Supernova, will it flag any errors or issues? Or does it force that new variable in as, for example, a new token rather than updating and changing the one that was being edited?
Yeah, so there is a lot of situations that can happen. In general, when you work with that, there are subtle differences between how Supernova and Token Studio work. I think one of the strongest points of Token Studio is that it is very flexible in terms of token structure, right? So with the sets, you can really change the data. But then when you, for example, want to document them, you say want to represent them as like, this is my brand and this is my brand, and maybe I apply some theme light and dark mode into it. So there is a lot of flexibility in the plugin, but once you are pushing it into Supernova, there is a certain degree of validation that we will run through in order to maintain the data integrity on our side, right? Also, the data models are not exactly the same, so we do quite a lot of checks just to make sure that nothing breaks, and also just to make sure that nothing breaks over time as you are pushing updates. So as you have seen, I have pushed the token, but I still knew that the token, or the Supernova still knew that the token has changed and it didn't disconnect it from the documentation, right? Now, there are cases where disconnection will break. Like, for example, if you move the token to some other group. But at this point, this is really a different token for us, right? There are also some, but I believe actually that Token Studio guys will be introducing IDs of the tokens somewhere down the road. I think there is even ticket opened on GitHub. And once we do have that, then we can also track changes as you move the tokens across the repository. So even that will be changed. And this sort of goes to what we have been explaining with Mike at the beginning. This is a continuous integration. We will be adding more features as both platforms evolve. So gradually, we know of most of the things that people are asking for, and we will try to bring them. So yes, to some parts of validation, I think you get more than you would have just with Token Studio. For example, we have permissioning system, so not everyone can push to Supernova. This is very important when you are managing a design system. So the permissions in the integration are actually something that works. So your viewers cannot be pushing changes. But then on the other hand, some things like tracking across the groups, for example, is not there yet, but it will be. And there is plenty of things that we'll be announcing over time.
Cool. Thank you. Dylan is asking another Another interesting question is this I think it goes back into that integration. Is this a replacement for Storybook? It's what our teams uses and won't be able to switch. Is there a way to take the benefits of Supernova's integration and documentation and have it imported into Storybook or embedded?
I mean, so
Not yet. We're not there yet, but
I will say this. It works the opposite way. So you can actually use Storybook with Supernova, and you can even import the documentation from Storybook.
yes.
And you can also export the documentation from Supernova as Markdown. So in theory, you could take the Markdown and then work off of that. Whether it's a good choice or not, that is everyone's guess. But you can bend the system so it does approximately what you want. However, it is definitely not a replacement for Storybook. The reason why we, again, have integration is because Storybook is loved by developers, right? And maybe you just want to make your design system fancier by introducing designers to your design system. So actually making it into a real design system, not just component library. And in that case, Supernova plays a vital role because it facilitates that connection with designers, with your product managers, and Storybook is just another integration, basically. So I would say enhancement, not replacement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rioni, I hope I pronunciate your name well. Sorry if I don't. With config around the corner and potentially announcing native tokens in Figma, are there action plans to support that in Supernova?
Are native tokens like a meme at this point in Figma? Because we have been asking for that for years.
Indeed, that's also my question mark in my head.
I'll say this: once it goes out, Supernova will support it, and I'm pretty sure I can say for Mike that Tokens Studio will support it as well, right? Figma is obviously a big player on the market. So again, idea of open ecosystem, it just should work, all of it together. So yeah, but whether they come or not, anyone's guess.
Yeah, but like you said, we'll definitely support it. And I think we've been long enough doing Figma's job in terms of the integration piece in Figma, right? So our ambition is not to really do that forever. So yeah, we'll also be very happy when native tokens are there. We will of course support that but at the same time remain as a reliable token management tool, which is I think what is really the power of our plugin. And once native tokens come in, it will be good for everybody. Be great.
Yes. So there is the hold on, I'm scrolling through the questions.
Yeah, there is a lot of them.
Yeah. I think one we have answered, which is like, can I import my design tokens created from scratch inside Supernova into Token Studio? I think you demoed like.
Yeah,
yes.
I haven't really responded to that. So as we said, the Token Studio is the source of truth, right? It provides the JSON, it provides the management layer basically of the tokens. So if you push those tokens from Token Studio, you can pull them from Supernova and then write them back to every of your team member. If you would create all the tokens inside Supernova, right now you can't push them back because of technical limitations right now. However, we will be definitely down the road introducing a exporter. This is how we call the technology that basically transforms the whatever data into a code for Token Studio as well. So you will be able to basically export the underlying JSON with the same data and then push that. Going forward, and this is not something that I'm saying lightly, we will also do a proper bidirectional sync. So anytime you do a change inside Supernova, it will be propagated to Token Studio and vice versa. but for that, the tools have to evolve a little bit more. So we went with the next best thing, where Supernova can still be your provider, but you just have to manage tokens somewhere else.
Okay. There's one last question, maybe. Is it possible, from Pablo, is it possible to use Token Studio / SD transforms to transform the tokens with this new approach?
Yeah. Yes. But again, like, I think the whole premise of Supernova and also Token Studio is that it allows for flexible workflows, right? So for many of those answers and questions, sorry, I'll give you yes, but, and the but is, should I actually do it like this, or is there a better way how to do that? Or does it fit what I'm doing currently? Nonetheless, the tools are there. Supernova has SDK. You can work off of that, and the transformers are also available and are working, as you have seen, with Token Studio properly.
Right.
Yeah, Mike, were you saying something?
No, I said right. That's correct.
Cool. Okay. Should the new sync provide be available in 135.5? It is currently not appear in the list of providers. I think we said that is out, right?
Yeah, it's definitely out. And it should be there in 135.5.
Yeah, maybe Figma is just taking their sweet time.
Close,
Yeah,
reopen.
that could be a little bit of caching, but if you see the 135.5, probably it should be there. But if it's not there, maybe restart the plugin once or check in a couple of hours, worst case. But yeah, we were testing it before stream, and it's there in the production plugin. So
yeah, I was actually running the production plugin
yeah.
in the demo. So, but anyway, I will be also on Token Studio channel. If there is some questions to ask about that integration, happy to help.
Yeah, indeed. I was scrolling through the questions, but I think we have 2 minutes left. Do you guys want to add something, like last words on this integration before I summarize and say goodbye to everyone? I think I'm looking forward to this, and I cannot wait to really try it out. So thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks everyone who has joined. We are really excited about this integration, even though it's just the beginning. I think it still can help actually quite a lot if you are, especially if you are using both of the platforms. And yeah, hit me with any questions. I'm a talkative person, so I will definitely help as much as I can. And thank you, Mike and Laura, for joining me here. This was a great honor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one. Thanks, everyone. It was nice being here today, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hear from people who start using the integration, how it's going, and how we can take it forward. So, like Jiri mentioned, on our Token Studio Slack, I'm there as well, of course. So, yeah, feel free to drop me a line if you have ideas.
Indeed. Indeed. So remember, this integration is already available. You can go and try it out right now. It's in 135.5. So just close Figma and reopen it. I'm sure it will work. It's like Windows sometimes. And then there's a tutorial. Jiri mentioned that there's a tutorial available, so you can go and
yeah, I've shared it in
cool,
chat.
perfect. There's a Supernova provider, don't forget that, in Token Studio. And then there's a new event also in Supernova, right? I saw that the new event that you can trigger to update the docs. The other remaining questions, you can ask them again. You can contact Jiri and Mike through the Slack channel, Token Studio Slack channel, or through Discord or by email. Go test the integration, and thank you so much for participating into this session. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.